When we think about vaccines, our minds usually jump to fighting off a virus or some kind of bacteria, right? But what if the real threat isn't the bug itself? Today, we're diving into a really clever type of vaccine that goes after the invader's most dangerous weapon, not the invader itself.
So, let's just start with this question right here. What if the bacteria hanging out in your body isn't even the main problem? What if the real danger is a poison it releases? This one idea, well, it's the key to understanding a whole class of incredibly important vaccines.
And that weapon has a name, a bacterial toxin. It's a poison, plain and simple. For certain diseases, this is the thing that actually makes you sick. It's what causes the awful muscle spasms in tetanus, or makes it so hard to breathe in diphtheria. The bacteria are just the factories producing this stuff.
All right, so let's meet the real culprit here. To really get a handle on how these vaccines work, we first have to understand the poison they're designed to take down.
And this right here is the crucial point. The bacteria might be present, yeah, but it's the toxins they're pumping out that cause all the chaos. So if you can stop the poison, you can stop the disease, even if the bacteria are still around. That is the strategic genius behind Toxoid vaccines.
Okay, so here's the big question. How do you possibly train an immune system to fight a poison without, actually poisoning the person? Well, you build a harmless decoy. Let's take a look at how scientists make a toxin completely safe.
It's this really brilliant 5-step process. First, scientists isolate the raw bacterial toxin. Then comes the magic step. They detoxify it. After they purify this now harmless substance, they add something called an adjuvant, which is basically a hype man for your immune system. It helps get its attention. And finally, they formulate it all into the vaccine you get.
So how do they actually detoxify it? They use stuff like chemicals or heat to basically break the toxin's harmful function. It's like taking a dangerous key and filing down all the teeth so it can't open any locks. But, and this is so important, they leave its unique 3D shape perfectly intact. Because that shape, that's the wanted poster your immune system needs to see.
And that brings us to our star player, the Toxoid. This thing, this harmless but still totally recognizable decoy, is the centerpiece of the entire operation. It's the perfect, safe training dummy for our body's defenses.
So, once this harmless decoy is inside the body, how does the training actually happen? Well, it kicks off this highly specific training exercise for our immune system, teaching it to recognize the wanted poster of the real threat, so it's ready for anything.
Then make this super clear, let's use an analogy. The real toxin is like a dangerous master key that can unlock disease in our cells. The Toxoid vaccine is like a perfect 3D printed copy of that key, but it's made of rubber. It looks exactly the same, but it's totally useless for opening locks. It's just a training dummy for your body's security system.
And this diagram here, it perfectly illustrates that whole training process. It shows the step-by-step journey from the moment of injection to the creation of a powerful, long-term defense force. Let's walk through it.
It all kicks off with these guys, the scouts of your immune system. They're called antigen-presenting cells, or APCs. They find our little rubber key, the toxoid, and they immediately recognize it as something foreign. They gobble it up, break it into pieces, and then display those little pieces on their surface. They're basically running around holding up a piece of the wanted poster, shouting, "Hey everyone, look what I found."
That alarm gets picked up by the next set of cells, the helper T cells. Think of them as the field commanders. They see the fragment being shown off by the APC, they confirm that, yep, this is a threat that needs a response, and they sound the battle horn, activating the exact defense team needed for this specific job.
And that activation signal reaches the B cells. These are the weapons factories. Once they get the order, they transform into something called plasma cells and just churning out millions and millions of tiny proteins called antibodies. And going back to our analogy, if the toxoid is the rubber key, these antibodies are the custom-made locks, designed to perfectly fit and jam it up for good.
So the end result of all this training is a two-part victory. First, you've got an army of these neutralizing antibodies now on patrol. But maybe even more importantly, the immune system creates memory B and T cells. These are the veterans. They'll remember the threat shape for years, ready to launch a massive, overwhelming response in an instant if they ever see it again.
And that memory, that is everything. This brings us to the payoff. What happens when all of this training is put to the test and your body comes face to face with the real, dangerous toxin?
I mean, just look at this. It's a night and day difference. Without the vaccine, the toxin gets in, it binds to your cells, and you get sick. But with the vaccine,
The moment that toxin enters your system, it is swarmed and neutralized by that pre-existing army of antibodies. The master key is jammed before it can even find the lock.
And that's the beautiful efficiency of it all. The memory cells kick into high gear, of course, but the antibodies already circulating are often enough. They physically latch onto the toxin, blocking its harmful parts and effectively disarming it right on the spot. No toxin activity means no disease. Simple as that.
All right, let's wrap this up with a quick look at the playbook for these vaccines, their key features, and where we actually see them out in the real world.
You know, every technology has its pros and cons, right? On the plus side, these vaccines are extremely safe. There's no live pathogen, so they can't revert to a toxic form, and they're very stable. But that immunity can fade over time, which is why we need booster shots. And it's important to remember, they only protect you from the toxin, not from the bacteria itself.
And you've almost certainly encountered these yourself. The tetanus shot you get after stepping on a rusty nail, the diphtheria vaccine, these are the classic examples. They're a staple of immunization schedules all over the world, often combined in vaccines you might know as DTaP or Tdap.
So, we've seen how targeting a weapon, not the invader itself, can be an incredibly effective strategy. And that leaves us with a fascinating final thought. What other medical challenges could be solved not by fighting the enemy head-on, but by cleverly neutralizing its tools instead?